to be marching towards victory. If we were marching and living victoriously, a lot of these things, these foolish, idiotic things that are coming up, bills that are coming up in Congress and things like that, a lot of these things would already be set beside the curb. If God's people were where they need to be. If God's people would again get engaged and get involved, first of all, get informed and get engaged and get involved. And there's no one on the planet who's so busy they can't get involved to some degree. There's something all of us can do at some point in time, all the time. And so God enables selected servants by the power of His Spirit. When I say selected servants, I mean those who have selected, those who've made a choice. Because if we'll avail ourselves to God, He'll enable us, He'll empower us, and give us the strength to accomplish that, and the tools we need to accomplish great things for His glory. So, there will be no peace until there's a king in Israel in the book of Judges. There will be no peace until there's a king in Israel. And actually, ultimately, there will be no peace in Israel even today until King Jesus comes back to rule and reign. There will be no peace. There will be no peace until they recognize their true Messiah, their real Messiah, Jesus. And so, let's go ahead and dive into Judges chapter 1 just a little bit. We're going to try to get through this quickly because Bonnie and I have an engagement about an hour away early this afternoon that we have to be at, and so we're going to be picking them up and putting them down. And so we're going to try to turn us all out at a reasonable time as much as possible. Joshua, verse 1. After the death of Joshua, it came to pass, the children of Israel asked the Lord, after the death of Joshua. Now I want you to remind you of something here. Joshua died, but God didn't. Amen. Joshua died, Moses died, but God didn't. Joshua died, but God didn't. And the people of Israel asked the Lord. You know, too many times, and Lord, there's a lot of different directions we could go with this. Again, I think I made a reference to this in the last week or two probably. Sometimes there are churches that their pastors died. Brother McAllister passed away. And his folks are left for right now without a pastor. They loved him. He was a good man, good pastor. They loved him. And they're hurting. They're grieving over that. But I think a good word of them or any other congregation that happens to it does happen. Brother Tim Howell passed away, left his congregation. And this was a sudden thing with him. No one was looking for it. And when he passed. But I think it's important for us to remind congregations and remind one another. These people died, but God didn't. They've gone on. They've passed on. They've gone on to their reward. But God is still with us. God is still here. And so the children of Israel, during this period, they understood some of that. And so they asked the Lord as to what they should do. And what they should have done. In fact, and we as believers, we need to ask God about everything. There's not a decision that we face that we shouldn't ask the Lord about. Now, some people may think that's silly. But really, we need, if it comes, especially certainly major decisions, but day-to-day decisions. Sometimes we need God's wisdom on these things. And we need to ask God's help. And for God to move, speak to us. And so the success of all these campaigns that you read about throughout the book of Judges and before the book of Judges, all the campaigns that went on before all that, the success of these campaigns was due to Israel's dependence on the Lord. Let me say this. The success in our daily Christian walk is going to be due to our dependence on God. It's going to be due ultimately to our dependence on God, as well as some other things. Our dependence is number one. We've got to depend on God. We've got to trust God. And so prayer expresses dependence on God and seeks God's leadership in specific actions. The children of Israel knew that Joshua did, but God wasn't, and they prayed. And we need to not forget that. They did forget that. There were a number of times they did forget that at this point. They did forget it, but we shouldn't forget that. So, what began with conquest in this chapter, verses 1 through 26, it soon became compromise. later on in the chapter, verses 27 to 36. And I know we won't get all that far today. But what began with conquest became compromise, as these defeated tribes gave into the enemy. These tribes of Israel, as they gave in, they compromised and they gave in to certain things.